to crypto-clothesline. We're glad to be here with you. Hanging out the crypto laundry. Getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto-clothesline.
Hi, Amy Rose.
Hi, Abheeti. How you going?
I'm good. Let's talk a little bit about why we're doing what we're doing, Amy Rose.
Yes. So our show is about helping women join the blockchain wealth revolution for themselves and for their families.
Our names are amy-rose-goodey and abheeti-kathryn-pass. We're speakers in blockchain and crypto, and we are on a mission. Well, that was a really interesting chat with Zia.
It was so good. And I don't really, and you know this about me, I do not like travel. It's not my favorite thing. And the main reason is because it's so complicated to get comfort and something that you want on the spot in a different country.
Right. It is interesting because that's actually what I love about travel, is that it is so unpredictable. And she was talking about pairing services together with, say, certain personality types, or, like getting people to describe what they like and they don't like, their preferences, and that being recorded. I'm guessing that's what's recorded on the blockchain, and using AI to be able to pair people with services and service providers that really suit their personality type. And I thought that was really interesting because it's actually what I love about travel, is that you never know what you're going to get when you get there.
Yeah, and that's actually why a lot of people do travel, because they want to be out of their comfort zone. They don't want to be at home, and that's my partner to a T, but not me at all. I just love my own bed and speaking in my own language and having these comforts and not getting food poisoning.
I have been traveling. I've now pretty much stopped with kids. I mean, we travel together, but it's a different kind of travel. But I travelled for well and truly over 20 years, including living in other countries. I don't think I ever got food poisoning, ever.
Oh, you're very, very lucky. I went to Cambodia, and this is the first time I went overseas. This was my first experience, and went to Cambodia, and I spent a lot of time in the hotel room, very, very sick. And my partner did not... He couldn't understand how I wanted to stay huddled in this little room. I mean, I'm not going to go into graphic detail, but it wasn't pretty. And then I sort of came to the end of the disease, and we went to these temples in Angkor Wat, and they were beautiful, and they were freezing cold, this stone. It was like ice. And I actually went from pole to pole because I had a fever hugging this temple because I was like burning hot and felt like I was going to die.
Oh my gosh. Well, no wonder you've got that association with travel, because you've had such a shitty experience. Excuse the pun.
Do you know what? You might like this because of your love of Italian everything, but I was quite sick, and like I said, and all I wanted was pasta. Like, I was in Cambodia, and the odds of finding a dish that would satisfy me, I was just like, I don't want any of this street food, just give me some pasta. And my partner, he's like, I'm gonna do it, and he's on his phone, and this is years ago when phones were not smartphones, and he's just finding this. He got on the back of a scooter, he was gone for hours, and he came back with this cold pasta. It was amazing. It was like
that, my love, is true love.
It is, and if we had chosen, it wouldn't have taken that long.
If you'd chosen.
If I existed in my travelling era with something that could solve all these problems for me, I would have been far better off. I wouldn't have been, oh my God, I don't even want to, yeah, it's horrible.
Amy Rose, how likely is it that you'll be jumping on the Chozun token sale coming up in July?
It's highly likely. Only because I need everything done for me. This is why people have travel agents, because no one wants to deal with this.
Yeah. I've travelled with different people before, and most of the time I travelled alone, but people would say, oh, who are you travelling with? And I'm like, oh, I'm on my own. And they'd be like, well, where are you going next? And I went, I don't know. Like, I literally had no idea where I was going. It was just like, today, I think I'll head to Paris. And then in Paris, I might meet someone. They're going, hey, we're going to Bosnia. Okay, I've never been to Bosnia. Let's go there. Like, it was literally that random. But it drives a lot of people really, really crazy.
That actually takes a lot of balls, a lot of vaginal balls. I don't really know what. But the reason why we're talking about travel, to give everybody some context, is because we interviewed Zia from Chozun. And Chozun is a tokenized travel company.
And Chozun is really interesting. I mean, I was asking lots of hairy questions. Well, I thought they were. She probably just thought they were pretty naff. But things like, they're looking at pairing you with a service provider or somebody who can really give you the experience that you want on your travels. And it really is providing the client with their preferences and making it easy for the client or for the traveller to be able to have a positive travel experience. It's a very interesting approach. I quite like it.
And I would pay big bucks to have something comfortable organised for me in a country where otherwise that would not be the case.
Well, it was interesting because she described some of the groups that people would be sort of labelled under, for want of a better description. I'm sure they've got a much nicer way of putting it. And there was the adventurist, and there was the culturalist, and there was the generalist. So the adventurist loves mountaintops, and the culturalist is generally tending to go to art galleries, and the generalist just does everything. Amy Rose, would you be under the comfortist?
I don't think they've got an umbrella for me. I like everything really comfy.
I think we'll create the umbrella and we'll suggest it to Chozun.
Yes, because there's people who go on cruises. They go on cruises because they don't want to trek around the country. They just want to be on, but like, I'm not a cruise person, but I totally get why people want to hang out on a boat.
We did talk to Andrea Walker some months back about creating a cruise for women in tech, so we can all get together and just brainstorm all our brilliant ideas. So maybe we'll be doing a cruise yet.
That would totally float my boat.
Let's have a listen.
Yay! Welcome to the show, Zia. Zia is from Chozun, and she has chosen us to be interviewed on the Crypto-Clothesline podcast. Welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure.
Can you tell me super quickly, how did you get the name Chozun, and can you spell it for the listeners so they can find you?
Sure. It's spelled Chozun, because we were in China, so we have a lot of Chinese focus, a lot of Chinese customers. I guess it's a portmanteau of kind of two words. So it's a portmanteau of choosy or to choose, and then zunggui, which is in Chinese means premium or high end.
Awesome. Choosing. Okay. I'm just writing that down.
And also it kind of sounds like, being a chosen one, kind of play on it. It's obviously spelled slightly differently, but, when you say it, it kind of sounds like to be chosen.
Yes, the chosen one.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Zia, could you tell us a little bit about your background, even from right back to when you were in high school, and your journey and how you got to your position now, which is quite an impressive position. And you briefly spoke with us a little bit before the interview on your journey, even through the music industry until this point now in marketing. Could you share with us the story of how you got to this position?
So I've always been a massive geek. So at school and stuff, I always tinkered with computers, and so I was always into tech and things like that. I never followed that as a vocational kind of idea when I was at school. I just kind of like it was a hobby. So actually what I did in university has zero bearing on what I actually do now. So I did art history purely because of expectations around academia and things like that. So I actually did want to do something like at university. I kind of thought I'd do something different, but ended up doing art history. But during my time at university, I spent a lot of time working on the student paper, and kind of we were doing some of the digitization of that. And then also in my summer holidays, I would work in Warner Brothers Music as a kind of digital intern. So yeah, and then I left university, got started in a startup, a music startup. Basically, we were providing music videos to mobile companies, content really for mobile phone companies. And then that kind of evolved into PlayStation and things like that. And eventually that company sold to Sony, and I left and started working worked for a big telco. And then I started working at a TV production company doing their digital sort of side of the business. So for instance, we did kind of quite a pioneering show, I suppose, when you look back at it, which started solely on the web. It was about 2008, and it was this kind of talent show where there were two boxes in the middle of a town or city, actually, in the UK called Bristol. And these two boxes would be filled with a talent or an act for 6 hours of the day, and it was streamed online, and then the online audience would vote, and the acts that went through would come back and do a new thing the next day for 6 hours in this box, this clear box. Wow. And so they would, compete against each other. And I mean, it was pretty grueling for them because it was 6 hours in a box with trying to entertain people. But yeah, so that kind of stuff. So we did sort of kind of interesting things like that. And then I worked on a very big project that kind of was a massive Herculean task. And at the end of that, I was like, I'm going to take a little break and go to Australia. So I came to Australia 2010, and I just on a working holiday, actually. I didn't know I was really going to stay here, and ended up getting sponsored from a job where I went to working in advertising. And that's where I met co-founder Teresa.
Wow. Awesome story. That's really impressive. It's ironic the amount of people who we talk to who have a degree, but they don't use it in real life or in their current position. It's almost as if you go to university, you get your experience in being educated,
yes,
and move on to something that you really love.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if it's a British thing, but there was a consideration, certainly for me, that you do an academic style degree. So, for instance, English, science, maths, like if you do vocational degrees weren't as much of a thing. They are a bit more now, I think, very specific kind of vocational degrees. But yeah, I mean, I think also there's nothing better than learning on the job, really, or learning from your own kind of passion. And if you end up with a degree that's your passion, I love art, but I'm never going to use it except for boring people to death when we're in an art gallery. But yeah, I think there's nothing better than actually learning practically on the job. University's great, but practical learning and getting your hands dirty, can't really beat that.
I think there's a big difference between theory and practice. And I think in terms of tertiary education, like you say, there are those two main streams. There are the universities that sort of teach you how to think, or maybe they're teaching you to think the way they want you to think. And then you've got your more sort of practical applications. And I was always torn between the two myself. Like you, I went for the academia, but I actually don't think anything's ever lost. I think I had a major in linguistics, and I just thought, why am I doing this? I'm never going to be able to use this in the real world. But in fact, as I've traveled through my life, it's come up again and again and again, the relevance, like nothing's ever lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, no, I mean, like I say, I built to death if we go to an art gallery. I've always think, and it gave me a good grounding in understanding social history and things like that. You're not just learning about the art, you're learning about the context of the art and all of that sort of stuff. So there's definitely stuff you keep in it, and it filters through sometimes in different ways to what you're doing. Yeah, I think also independent thinking is a really important thing, and I think you can go to university and they can teach you how to learn potentially, but unless you have independent thought, you're probably not going to utilize that in the best way.
Well, that's where crypto comes in. Can you tell us how you got involved in that side of your business?
Yeah, sure. So I've been kind of like a blockchain or a Bitcoin enthusiast for a while, and then so myself and our CTO, we bought some Bitcoin a while ago. We've been friends for a while and all lived together actually, and he bought some and I was like, oh yeah, I'll get some. So we kind of got some of that, saw how it was progressing, and then I was looking at the technology behind it, essentially the blockchain, and looking at how, if that was going to be a more efficient way for us to do things. And I came to realize it definitely was. So really we started with the blockchain and then we moved to the crypto. So the blockchain essentially, I don't know if you know how traditional kind of, I guess, maybe marketplaces or travel marketplaces might work, but they're quite heavy. They can be quite archaic. I mean, if you go to Ctrip, which is one of the biggest travel platforms in China, and they still use fax machines to book hotels, which in this day and age is crazy.
Yeah.
But so there's quite a lot of weight and cost associated with the traditional platforms for the providers on those platforms. Using the blockchain, we could actually make that more efficient and less costly. And so then from there, we looked at, okay, well, now we can kind of bring in our own crypto to drive that ecosystem more, and also to kind of build the loyalty platform that we're currently building and disrupting that loyalty space. We've always had our eye on loyalty, but we didn't want to kind of do it in the traditional sense. So this really opens it up, gives some of the ownership back to the users, which is what we wanted to do. So yeah, that's sort of how it's really been a natural evolution. We're all big into tech, so it's kind of, we'll always look at something, and if it's something we think is applicable, we might look at, doing it. But obviously we're not going to throw everything at it. But, if it's going to work, then we'll look at it.
Zia, could you, just for, someone off the street, could you just explain, if I wanted to book a holiday, if I'm just thinking, you know what, I want to go somewhere for a holiday, I've got cryptocurrency, I know all about it, I'm really keen to use it. How then would Chozun come into the story? How would I be able to utilize Chozun?
Yeah, sure. So we have what we call providers. So we basically have things to do and places to go at your destination. So everything from private drivers, shops, food, nightlife, hairdressing, all the kinds of things you would want in your destination, tours, special tours, access to private members clubs, things like that. And essentially you just go onto the platform and you would type in what you want, match you. So we use artificial intelligence and data science to kind of understand the user a bit more, rather than someone like TripAdvisor, or in China they have DMPing, where you have a bunch of different reviews and a bunch of subjective reviews, and there's a lot of noise. It really takes into account your preferences, and then it matches you to what you'll like. And we give you, a few options, but we'll give you the best match. You can just book or reserve it within the platform, and you can use. So you essentially, if you don't want to have a local currency and you want to, you might be in Singapore for a couple of days, you could probably do most stuff through the platform.
So you're not introducing your own cryptocurrency for this. You're enabling people to use other types of crypto. Is that correct?
We're introducing our own. So we are introducing our own crypto.
So by acquiring CZN, I can then go forward and use my CZN to book things.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's other things you'll be able to do as well. So as I mentioned, we do a lot of personalization, which with that means that we have a lot of interesting data, but you as a user will own that data. And what we have is a bunch of partners who work in our loyalty system, and they can create special events within that system to engage with you. So you could choose, so British Airways, for instance, they want to engage with adventurers who are into, climbing mountains or whatever it is, right? So they can go into the platform and say, I will reward you X amount of CZN to do this. And they can choose to interact with people, with brands on the platform, and allow them to use some of that data, rather than us selling it to advertisers as, a traditional player might do. They actually get rewarded with CZN for allowing that.
Does that mean that you don't have access to their data, to their personal data, but it's sort of stored somewhere if they want to release it to a third party? How does that work?
So we still have access to that data. I mean, we're talking about their kind of their preferences, their what we call a kind of a user profile. So we still have access to that, but we don't allow third parties to access any of that.
Oh, I see. So it's based on trust between you and your customer, and then the customer decides if he or she wants to release it to a third party in order to be rewarded with the
CZN for that. And then there are other things that you can use the CZN for. So we have a bunch of influencers in the platform, and you can use it to engage with them. There is also sort of certain levels of ownership of the CZN. So if you have a certain level of ownership, you'll gain access to certain things like private members clubs and things like that. So we have private members clubs across the world. So rather than you having to be an actual member of that, if you have a certain level of CZN, then you can access those things. So there's lots of different things that you can actually use the CZN for. There are travel challenges, so you can set your friends' travel challenges, things like that. So lots of things that will drive the ecosystem.
So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I also did anthropology at uni, and we looked a lot at ethnocentricity. It sounds like some of those things, like the private members club, do you think they're more driven to the Chinese culture than, say, to Western culture, or do you think that is relevant across the board with humans, full stop?
Well, certainly status face is a very big thing in Chinese culture. So our particular Chinese audience is independent, millennial Chinese, right? So they're not the kind of people that you see hopping off buses in large groups.
Yes.
They're the kind of forward thinking, and actually they're traveling a lot more like Westerners than their older counterparts.
Okay.
Their big thing is that they want to be doing things that other people aren't doing, and they want to be showing off that they are doing those things. So
that's very cool.
Yeah, it's a new thing for them almost to be doing that, independently traveling. It's actually pretty new for them.
It's very big, yeah.
And it's growing all the time. They really did traditionally. It's a great planning culture, China. So you actually, when you look at data around how long they take to plan a trip, it's actually about 9 days on average, which is incredible. So
probably takes me 9 minutes.
Right, exactly. So,
Wow, that's fascinating. So you girls have had some fairly extensive experience, I'm guessing, living and working or however, functioning in China.
Yeah.
And you've been able to take that information and basically create a business which is really spearheading or aiming towards that particular slice of culture and age group and what have you.
Yes, absolutely. It is. I mean, but the thing is, Western people really like it too, but they're our secondary market as a focus for our strategy. But Westerners are like, well, why haven't I had this before, But our target, purely because we know it's a growing market, we know we're ahead, and we know it now, it is our focus, so the Chinese outbound market.
That's fantastic that you've got such clarity over who your avatar is and who you're providing. Like you've seen their pain point, you've seen their need, and you're providing the solution for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually did a really interesting test. We got some Chinese people to try and pick somewhere to go. So use various sites to pick somewhere to go. So they were using traditional sites like, as I mentioned, Dianping, which is kind of like, if you don't know it, it's kind of like a Yelp or a TripAdvisor, I guess, similar kind of thing. You can actually buy Dianping reviews for about, I don't know, probably the equivalent of about $3 or $4. So there's lots of reviews and things like that. So we did this test, and one of them was trying to find somewhere to go and get her hair cut, right? Took her about 40 minutes. Another one was trying to find, somewhere to go to eat. Took them over an hour and a half to look at things, and they still hadn't made decisions. I mean, no decisions had been made at this point. So, that kind of crippled by indecision, that kind of overwhelming choice is something that's actually a real pain point, and it wastes so much time. And the funny thing is as well, is that a lot of Chinese people are so used to it, they don't realize they're wasting time until you give them a better alternative.
Well, that's fantastic that you were able to get that information, get that feedback, and thereby create even a sharper product, which is going to be answering their needs, even if they're not aware of them.
Yeah. I mean, I think, obviously data is really important. So we do a lot of our stuff based on data. It's like, okay, well, this isn't working. Why? Let's look at the data. This is working. Why? Look at the data. It's pretty important, I think, to stay on your toes that way.
Wow.
So, Teresa, there's a lot of people, including myself, I'm not a real big traveller. And one of the reasons for that is I find it, and as you just explained, it's pretty frustrating at times. And to be honest, it's actually sometimes too much for me to organise anything outside of the country. But you and Teresa, you got together and you came up with this brilliant idea. But what was it that fueled that? Like, what had you experienced on your travel that made you go, you know what? We need to change this. What experience did you have?
Yeah, so we both actually used to travel quite a lot for work, and we would get to, traditionally, like, work will probably provide your hotel and some basics, stuff like that. But things to do and where to go is kind of left up to you. And you'll also probably, and we were doing it at the time, you'll find people add on something, a couple of days here on either side to fit, some leisure time. You're left up to doing that. And then you look at what there is out there to find things to do and where to go. And I've mentioned them before, things like TripAdvisor, things like Lonely Planet. But it's a lot of stuff spread over lots of different platforms, a lot of subjective stuff, nothing. So, you can read reviews on things, but really, do you have the context of that review? You'll have somebody say, oh, the serving staff were rude, or because they didn't provide a high chair for my child, or there's different things that really is subjective, not necessarily for you. So and I'm really, in particular, I'm quite fussy, and I don't really mind admitting that. So quite often take me a long time to find something like, well, I don't know if this isn't, sometimes you just have to leap in and try it yourself. But yeah, so we were kind of having this thing where it's like, there's too much noise. There's too much noise around what to do and where to go. And it's like, why can't we kind of get a bit more understanding about what people want. And then also put a little bit of serendipity, a little bit of surprise in there, because I think that's something that we actually lose quite a lot in being so connected. The way in which we do things where we kind of match someone, there's a little bit of surprise in there, or which is quite nice for the customer, you know, rather than you're like going through all this stuff and then you're finally settled on something. There's this nice kind of matching thing where you're like, oh, that's surprising. This was all stuff that we felt when we went to travel places. We were like, these are things that we feel like it's really painful, it's really annoying, and why can't somebody just tell me, hey, this is the perfect spot for what you want to do? So that's where it came from, really from our pain point. And then we, you know, you've got that pain point, but you need to understand if other people have that pain point. We kind of gathered together like friends and colleagues, and we asked them, before we'd kind of written any lines of code or anything, we asked them to text us when they wanted something. And that kind of helped us validate that it was a need, but also validate the kind of things that people want. That's really where we started. And then...
Wow. So is it something, you mentioned that people can use fiat now. Yeah. So is it actually in process as we speak?
Yes, it is. It is. We've got a soft sort of beta in Australia. We're actually mainly quite active in Southeast Asia. We got into an accelerator in China. So we spent a bit of time in China. And so our focus was China outbound, as I mentioned before. And a lot of that was focused around Southeast Asia. So we're actually active in about 20 cities across the Southeast Asian region, and now in Australia as well. But softly in Australia, we're building up our inventory. So yeah, and obviously at the moment, we're kind of focusing on building the next iteration of product to kind of become this big ecosystem that I was talking about before. So we want to be sort of like the people's sort of travel platforms. People can really get excited about what they're doing. They can interact with other people that travel like them eventually, and, you know, things like that. So yeah.
Is it possible, so for example, I've had an experience using your platform. Is there a space where I can put in reviews and things, even though they're subjective? And does that help other travellers who might have similar tastes and levels of fussiness to me?
So what we do is kind of slightly different. Obviously, we still do the star kind of rating thing, but you kind of choose from words, or you can type in different words that will be associated with the thing, and you can also leave added feedback too. But what we try and do is sort of narrow it down, like you said, to preferences. So you can say, well, this was, because then we understand contextually who you are and what you think about that business, right? So it's not just about, well, I'm writing a review that randomly about this. That person who's reading that review doesn't know who the user is, right? Or they're not necessarily. Right. So we're looking contextually at it. So we have what we call user cohorts, but outwardly they're called travel squads. So one example would be, you're the culturist, right? So you're the culturist and you've gone to this particular place, but you think this about it. So then we understand the context of what you think.
Oh, so you've sort of got those people, so to speak, grouped into generic sorts of titles, so to speak. I mean, not to throw everybody, lump them all under one thing, but you've got the adventurists, like you said, you've got the culturalists, you've got those that prefer the art gallery as opposed to those who prefer the mountaintop.
Right, exactly. Then we've got generalists who like everything, you know, that's sort of me. But you can change as well. You're not fixed into this. And then, of course, it's understanding all the data from different points of the journey. So not just the user, also the provider.
I'm just interested, say for example, I'm an adventurist and I decide to go and get a haircut before I go and hit the mountaintop, or I go and buy a beanie or whatever it is, and say I experience really poor service with that provider, but that provider's on your platform. How do I give you that feedback so that other people don't get a negative experience through your platform?
So as I mentioned, we do have like a star rating thing, but we also have, there is an extra like piece of, just a text field where you can give us feedback on that. So you absolutely can give us feedback. We tend to, like, the way in which it works is it will automatically flag if there is some kind of, issue. And then one of our kind of destination insiders will review that. So they'll review that particular provider.
Right. And as a provider of a service, do I get to give feedback on particular clients as well? Oh, cool. Very interesting. So it really is an ecosystem, interactive, as you said.
Absolutely.
Great.
Okay, Zia, do you have any feelings on the future of blockchain technology beyond travel and beyond all the ICOs that we're seeing at the moment? Where do you see blockchain and cryptocurrency in, let's say, 5 years? What are your hopes and your dreams?
Absolutely. So I'm a big advocate for blockchain, obviously. I believe it will disrupt a lot of traditional industries. I think we haven't seen... So traditionally, technology takes around 10 years to actually mature, right? And we're coming to that point with blockchain. And that's why I think we're starting to see A, real use cases, and B, that's where you get hype from, right? So you've got now the ICOs that are kind of a, use case for blockchain and things like that. And you're starting to see a lot of hype around that, which I think will die down. And that is generally what tends to happen when you get to that sort of 10-year mark. So I think what we'll see, and it won't be right for everything. It's not right for everything. But I think we haven't even seen some of the developments that can happen with it, particularly when you start combining it with potentially other technologies. We're starting to see a lot of AI on the blockchain now. And so I think there's a real opportunity to disrupt a lot of things. I think some of the most interesting things about it are the decentralization. How far that will go is, I think, down to particular, regulatory things. I think there are definitely people that are really embracing that, or governments that are really embracing that, others that are not. So I think that'll be really interesting. And, with the cryptos and with the ICOs, I think, you see ICOs where quite clearly there is no use for it. And I think people are getting more sophisticated in understanding that. We'll see less and less of those. It's already harder for ICOs to raise money, just as they did a year or 2 years ago, because people are becoming more sophisticated in the market. And I think we'll see ICOs being far more regulated, being far more like the traditional VC process, which they are already getting like that. You have to have pre-investment to run an ICO now. You can't just run an ICO. And so I think over sort of, as you mentioned, the 5-year period, what we'll see is I won't swear, but the crap start to kind of fall away, because, with hype comes crap, of course. You're always going to have that. And you'll start to see then the real use cases and the real companies that are going to build on this technology and take it to the next level. And I think we're going to see, companies worth in the same region as Google and Facebook in sort of 5 to 10 years that are blockchain based. And there are a couple that I already think are kind of like sleeping giants of blockchain. But those companies will be there and they will dominate. And so I think, there's always going to be crap, but it'll drop off and then we'll start to see the real.
What about the fact that ICOs, there's quite a lot of interesting information, and Amy Rose wrote a blog about it recently, ICOs being replaced by STOs.
Yes, people are getting oversaturated with it. And so I feel like in some ways it's to kind of move away from something that's oversaturated and be like, oh no, this is an STO. But, securities tokens, I think they're rising. They're just a bit harder to do because a lot of exchanges don't accept them. So I think that's probably something that'll change. Okay.
So if you're developing an ICO, do you ever get the sense that you should actually be developing an STO in case they are being replaced in the marketplace?
I think it's a bit late down the track for us to do that now.
Right.
For us. Yeah. Essentially, loyalty is an asset, but at the moment, we still kind of think of ourselves as really to.
Sure.
So as women in this space, and we talk to a lot of women who go traveling and they go to events, and actually Chozun and crypto and travel is actually, it's pretty big in the crypto space because there's events that go on all over the world, and it's amazing as a community to come together and experience that. I'm wondering though, we've spoken to women who go to these events and they travel overseas and they experience a lot of sexism, and some women haven't as well. I'm wondering, what's your experience when you're traveling and you're in these little crypto groups? And
well, actually, at events, I've had nothing but positive experiences, and I do go to a lot of events. I've been traveling a lot, different events recently, and I've actually experienced very positive feedback when I'm at events. Where I haven't experienced as positive feedback is in kind of groups or online groups. And of course, this is where, people hide behind their keyboards. So it's a bit more, sort of, I guess, liberating for them to say. But I've definitely experienced sexism in groups. And I was in one particular WeChat group, Chinese one, and they were really quite condescending and rude. I said, basically kind of indicating that I didn't know anything and I didn't know what I was talking about. And I kind of, I sort of shut them down. But other than that, it's been okay. There definitely needs to be more women in the space. I think a lot of people that started with it were guys, or visibly started with it were guys, and they kind of created this little boys club around it, like, haha, we've got this great thing. And there's a lot of that still exists, where it's like women don't know what they're talking about. How could they possibly? It's that kind of, I guess, old boys financial, kind of club. But it's changing and more people are getting into it. And, there's a couple of big companies that are coming up that are blockchain-based crypto companies that are led by women. And obviously we hope to be one of those as well.
Yay.
Awesome. That's really exciting for us.
One of the reasons that we started the clothesline was from my personal experience. I was online, and it was something as macabre as a Facebook online group. And I was sort of quite fresh in the space and just, having a little bit of a look around, feeling a little bit intimidated. But I knew that was because of my own baggage and not feeling that I had enough tech speak and what have you. Well, one of the guys, I recorded it all. I've got it all as screenshots. So I'd be interested perhaps one day to work with him further. But one guy mentioned that there was a whole heap of guys talking about how useless women were in crypto. And one of them said, well, look, they're only going to spend their money on haircuts and shoes, so why would we waste it on them? And somebody else said, well, why don't we develop a pink lip coin? And they just went on to completely debase the vagina and the whole female genitalia. And I was gobsmacked, to say the least. And yes, I did get involved, and in the end I just pulled out of the group and just said, like, you would never speak to your mother that way. How can you hide behind your keyboard and your screen and speak to women that way? It's unbelievable. But sadly there were women in there that had sort of grown testicles themselves and were like laughing along with the guys.
Yeah, it's just particularly those kinds of groups. It's so easy for people to do that, right? And yeah, the same group that I mentioned, I moved to a different group and there was a woman there talking about how sexist this other group was. And it's so unnecessary, but it also shows off how insecure they are about it. So, that's all. If a woman comes in and knows more and is more intelligent, that makes them feel belittled, I guess. So that's just sexism at its best, isn't it, really?
We've got 5,000 years of sexual history to undo, sexual, cultural stereotypes, I guess, That's okay, we can cut things out.
Before you go, Zia, do you have, you're an extremely motivated and driven person. Do you have any, I guess, role models or books that you've read or quotes that you go by that you sort of reflect on during your life and during your career?
So a lot of it actually comes from my upbringing, and I grew up pretty independently. My parents were very busy. They worked away a lot in film sets and things like that, so I'd sometimes visit them, but I would travel a lot then. I guess my strength and my motivation does come from myself, and I certainly admire a lot of women. A lot of people I admire, though, kind of more in the sort of social justice sort of area, so I don't know that they're particularly famous. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have any quotes, but I'm always kind of, I guess, no BS and no fear. Like, I think fear is the biggest thing that holds people back. So that's how I guess I live. Try not to have any fear. And of course, sometimes it creeps in, but unless you take a chance, you're not going to capture that big dream that you've got.
Perfect.
I absolutely love that. I try myself to not be afraid of anything, and it works in my favour a lot. So thank you so much, Zia.
Thank you very much for your time.
Well, that was very interesting. I liked especially the bit where she talked about the fact that your information wasn't for sale and that you were able to receive basically more Chozun tokens in exchange for your data.
I'm really excited to see how that all works, actually. I'm under the impression that you exchange whatever cryptocurrency you have for Chozun tokens, and then you use your Chozun tokens on their chosen companies or whoever's in their network. What I also liked about her story is so familiar because, okay, let's just say that every single person in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space hasn't done a degree in it, but there's professionals involved. Yeah, she's done her arts degree and she's now in blockchain and cryptocurrency. It's so similar to so many of our other guests who they've got their degrees and everything, but not everybody is actually using them.
Yeah, as we mentioned in the interview, that there's that fine line between learning something with an idea that you'll be using it in later life and actually what life brings you. They're not necessarily linear.
No. And I just think everyone just needs to accept that when people ask you what you're going to be when you grow up, when you're a 5-year-old, there's no way anyone can know that when they're 5, when they're 10, when they're 30, because it changes. And particularly in this space, it's accelerated by like 100-fold. No one knows what they're going to be like. You and I, what are we going to be doing? Who knows? We're doing a podcast now, but this is cryptocurrency and blockchain. Oh, the world is our oyster.
It's a very fertile oyster at that. It's an interesting one. I had a boyfriend and we were together for over 8 years, and he knew from the word go that he was going to be a pilot. Now he's a pilot with Virgin, or at least last I heard that he was. So he was a person who was like a spear or an arrow, just going directly to the target. And during those 8 years, I paid a fortune, in rent and things to support him while he was going to, baby pilot school and going through all the various licenses and things. And I used to feel so remiss, like there was something wrong with me because I didn't have that clarity, that vision, that target. But actually, as I've grown older, I just realized that there are different types of people.
Oh, well, obviously, and also there's definitely different types of people, and now we've realized there's different types of travelers. There's the anti-Amy-Rose traveler and the I'll take whatever I can get abheeti traveler.
I mean, we've spent evenings we met this woman at a Thai airport one time, and we were saying, is there a accommodation near the airport because we need to catch the train really early in the morning? And she went, oh, just come to my place. And I went, okay. And for me, it was so cool. It was such an amazing adventure. And my partner, who probably is more towards the Amy Rose slant, like he likes everything to be comfy, predictable, and he likes to know. And he was like, "Che cazzo fai?" Oops, I just swore in Italian. Anyway, he was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is crazy. And I went, well, you don't want to go? Okay, so we don't go. And he's going, no, dai andiamo, so we went. And it was the sweetest thing. So I just love that unfolding spontaneity. I have found myself in some pretty dangerous situations at times, but nothing that I couldn't navigate.
I think relationship-wise, when we went to Dubai, I feel quite vulnerable, and that is what I try and avoid. Me as a person, vulnerability is really what makes me very uncomfortable. I'll take conflict, I'll take confront, but vulnerability, that is something in travel that I find very difficult to deal with, not knowing where you are, not knowing who you're going to meet yet, and not knowing if someone has a key to your hotel room. And being vulnerable with your partner is actually, it makes it a really awesome experience, because 100% you two are the only people that you can rely on. So I can understand how you and your partner, who's probably more like me, had an awesome time because literally you're all each other has, and you need each other for that experience.
I mean, it was a total crack up. She just had one double bed and she said, right, you sleep with me. And she put him on the floor. Now I'm talking no mats, no pillows, no nothing. She just put a towel down and she said, that's for you. And there were pictures of her military boyfriend everywhere. And we thought, oh my God, is someone going to bust in? Is this a drug? We just thought everything. But you know what? We worked, and he was so cranky. Like I was just feeling the vibes going, oh my God, he's so cranky. And the next morning he said, you know what? That was the best night's sleep I've ever had. That woman gave me such a gift by being so unrelenting, so sort of, in a way, so inhospitable. And yet she had 2 total strangers sleeping in her little flat.
Oh my God, she's amazing. Who is this lady? She's
a lady that we met at the airport who was one of the ladies who gets you taxis. So, you arrive, you're hot, you're sweaty, you've been flying for 24 hours, you're pretty much at the end of your tether. And she's there saying, yeah, you go take the taxi, you go to you go to the green taxi, you tell him, 500 baht or whatever, 5,000 baht. We just said, look, we need a hotel nearby. Can you tell us? And she goes, you come to my house. I finish work now. And we're like, okay, thank you.
Do you know who this reminds me of? This reminds me of, and you and I both listened to this incredible woman this week, Amanda Palmer, who is a musician, and she goes, basically she visits countries, she asks her fans, and she's got millions of them. She's an amazing jazz dash, I don't know.
She said she's a punk slash cabaret.
Punk cabaret,
that's her music.
But she basically crowd funds her music. She goes to all of her fans when she's overseas and she asks them if she can stay at their house. She doesn't have all this glamorous hotel stuff. She connects directly and she risks a lot, like couch surfing and crowd surfing.
And yet she said that was the closest, she really feels like she's connecting to people on a level, and she gets to hear about how her music has affected their lives, like that Honduran girl who she went to stay at their house and they had nothing. They had nothing, and all the family went to sleep on the couches while she and, her band members got their beds. But then when she realised what, the mother came and thanked her the next day and said how much that her music had changed her daughter's life in a positive way, then she realised that she had actually given something and now she was receiving. It was beautiful.
Absolutely. And this is why, and I totally get why travel is really amazing for the human spirit, because watching people like Amanda Palmer, she has developed, she's so cultured now. She's had like a million more experiences than anyone could ever have, because she's gone to 1 million countries, stayed with 1 million human beings on, various levels of socio-economic levels.
Yeah.
She's incredible. And I recommend everybody have a listen to her TED Talk.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's about the art of asking.
Well, I think that the Amanda Palmer works in perfectly with what we're talking about, because we both have different perspectives on travel, and within the Chozun platform, we would come under different sort of, generic labels, I suppose, in order for them to create experiences that would suit our travel style.
Absolutely. Well, it's been awesome, Abheeti, and I shall see you next week.
All right, darling. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, you've called Abheeti
and Amy Rose
at
Crypto-Clothesline.
Leave a message after the
beep. Okay, 3, 2, 1, ready?
I'm willing to make a sacrifice. If you ladies would like me to come on to your show to actually educate your listeners in the truth about all this hullabaloo, hufflepuff, wobbly-gook that you are speaking, then I am willing to give up a little bit of my time for the education of the masses. But I would like you to understand that it is not appropriate to keep waffling on about all this Bitcoin crypto chain block stuff. It must stop. Well, if you don't mind me, making a pun, the buck must stop here. Well, there, wherever you are doing your recordings, you ladies.
Crypto-clothesline.